The air purifier, a sleek, matte black cylinder ordered 6 weeks prior from a reputable Shenzhen tech firm, a company I had meticulously vetted through 3 layers of shell corporations and digital forensics, was humming softly, masking the true silence of my Beijing apartment. It was 3:17 local time. My internal clock, honed by a decade of living on borrowed time, screamed anomaly. The anomaly wasn't the hum, it was the faint, almost imperceptible warmth emanating from the base unit's power brick, a warmth that persisted even when the unit was officially powered down via the wall switch. Pure curiosity, or perhaps professional paranoia, led me to the screwdriver set. I bypassed the standard security screws, which were cosmetic theater, and located the 2 hidden Torx head fasteners beneath the rubber feet. The internal architecture was immaculate, exactly as the schematic suggested, until I reached the power distribution board. Nested between the main capacitor and the filtration motor, soldered onto the backplane with a kind of precision that only a state actor's specialized lab could afford, was a microtransmitter suite, size of a thumbnail, powered by inductive bleed from the main line, running an encrypted burst cycle every 3.2 seconds. It wasn't amateur. It was MSS, Ministry of State Security, or worse, a cleanroom operation run by a partner agency leveraging MSS infrastructure. The fear wasn't a gasp or a tremor. It was a deep, frozen core of certainty. I was compromised. They hadn't busted the door down because they were still harvesting the intelligence I was providing, or more frighteningly, feeding them. My cover, Dr. Elena Chen, environmental consultant specializing in rare earth minerals, was now a liability with a 48-hour expiration date. I replaced the cover, leaving the device running its deadly, silent broadcast. I needed to move fast, surgically, and without introducing a single tremor into the surveillance stream they were currently enjoying. The first step, total acoustic lockdown. I activated this silent loop, the white noise generator built into the apartment's smart lighting system, tuned specifically to mask low-frequency speech and key typing. The game was now to clean out a decade of deep cover without alerting the listeners that the source had just realized the mic was hot. The 48-hour clock began ticking precisely when I resealed the power brick. My immediate danger lay not in the physical compromise of the apartment, but in the chain reaction it could cause. If they had the wiretap, they had established a pattern of life, and the next step was tracing my communications net backward. The priority was the asset, Cormorant, my highest value penetration, a vice director within the 17th Bureau. Cormorant knew me only by a pseudonym, communicated solely through encrypted, one-time pads delivered via a micro-SD card concealed inside antique teaware exchanged at ritualistic intervals. The next exchange was scheduled for 72 hours out. I couldn't risk making contact, digital or physical, as they would be monitoring the known dead drop locations. I needed to signal abort. Total silence, using the single, pre-agreed emergency visual indicator. This required leaving the relative safety of the apartment and heading to the National Art Museum, a monument to bureaucratic blandness and the perfect place for visual camouflage. I dressed meticulously. High quality but generic hiking wear, tinted contact lenses, a cap, and a mask, standard Beijing smog gear. I took the subway 2 stops past my usual route, walked 3 kilometers through a crowded Hudong market, and finally entered the museum complex. Cormorant and I shared a twisted appreciation for a particular piece of early PRC propaganda art, The Glorious Harvest, depicting smiling peasants holding impossibly large cabbages. The signal was subtle, placing a small, generic, untraceable silver keychain, the kind sold at every tourist shop, on the railing adjacent to the painting's description plaque. If Cormorant saw it before the MSS tail that would inevitably be assigned to the museum, he would know to pull back, burn his comms, and wait for Faye's chimera. The entire operation took 90 tense minutes, every shadow observed, every face cataloged. As I left, the digital residue of the keychain purchase was already dissolving in a pre-programmed shell account. It was a risk, but keeping Cormorant alive was paramount to salvaging the entire operations investment. With the asset paused, the real work began. The digital incineration. I returned to the apartment, bypassed the standard elevator surveillance using the maintenance stairwell, a path only known due to months of studying building schematics, and returned to my workstation. The primary machine ran a customized, triple-layered Linux distribution. The external layer was Elena Chin, full of mundane consulting files, environmental reports, and recipe books. The hidden partition, accessible only via a multi-factor biometric key integrated into a specific keyboard function sequence, housed the operational data. The mandate was total destruction, physical and logical. I initiated Protocol Phoenix, the automated, multi-pass cryptographic shredding utility designed to run continuously for 6 hours, cycling through 12 different government-approved deletion standards. But automation wasn't enough. I opened the tower casing. The 3 solid-state drives were mounted on custom caddies designed for rapid removal. I pulled the drives and placed them into a specialized titanium chamber, a miniature, induction-heated crucible disguised as a heavy-duty document safe. This crucible, powered by an independent lithium polymer battery, would superheat the drives past the Curie point, destroying all magnetic data alignment and rendering the chips physically inert. It was loud, requiring me to ramp up the silent loop volume to maximum, risking over-signaling the tap. While the drives melted, I turned my attention to the less obvious digital footprints, the secure router, the backup network drives hidden in the ventilation shaft, and the burner phones. Each device was subjected to physical destruction: hammer, acid, and then bagged for disposal in 3 separate, distant municipal waste streams. The goal was to leave no bit, no trace element, no shard of ceramic memory that could be recovered by the most sophisticated forensic team. For hours into the burn, the smell of ozone and melting plastic filled the apartment, the scent of a decade evaporating. The physical trace evidence was the most psychologically taxing. Data destruction is clean. Physical evidence is messy and requires violating the very controlled environment I had maintained for years. The team that placed the wiretap, likely a pair of specialized MSS technicians, would have left something behind, however minute. I needed to know their vector. I worked room by room, wearing full forensic gear: Tyvek suit, filtered respirator, ultraviolet lamp. I started at the wiretap insertion point, the power outlet. The air purifier was plugged into a specific wall socket that I rarely used. Under UV light, using a specialized chemical indicator spray, I scanned the surrounding drywall and floorboards. There, near the baseboard, almost invisible to the naked eye, was a faint, blue-green residue. Not common dust, but specialized construction adhesive used to anchor a temporary borescope fixture. They didn't come in through the main door. They came through the wall from the adjacent, vacant apartment, which I had believed was secure. The building manager, a kindly elderly woman, must have been paid off or replaced. This realization was a chilling blow, demonstrating a level of patience and integration far beyond a routine surveillance operation. They knew I was deep cover. They were just playing a long game. I used a microvacuum to collect the adhesive particles and place them into a lead-lined vial. This wasn't for analysis. It was for leverage. If I ever needed to prove the depth of the penetration, this was the evidence. I then turned to the apartment itself. Every sheet, every piece of fabric, every hair, and every skin cell was now evidence. I utilized the Agent Orange cleanup kit, a collection of high-powered, neutralizing solvents designed to break down human DNA and oil residues without leaving their own chemical signature. I wiped every surface I had touched, every door handle, every chair edge. The apartment had to be returned to a state of clinical neutrality, as if no one, let alone Elena Chin, had ever lived there. The process felt like erasing myself in real time. The moment the physical scrub was completed, 8 hours into the 48-hour window, I initiated the contingency exfiltration plan, Phase Chimera. This wasn't a central command directive. This was a personal fallback developed with my handler, known only by the codename Atlas. It required a face-to-face meet with the librarian, a deep-cover contingency resource based 1,200 kilometers south in Shanghai. I had to assume the Beijing station was burned to the ground and that any communication attempt to Atlas would be instantly flagged by the MSS due to the discovered tap. I couldn't fly manifests, passport checks, facial recognition gates. I couldn't drive, plate tracking. I chose the undocumented rail journey. I needed a clean passport and a new identity immediately. The emergency kit, hidden beneath the kitchen floor tiles inside a sealed vacuum pouch, contained 3 items: 50,000 renminbi in small, untraceable denominations, a pre-programmed NFC transit card loaded with multiple disposable payment layers, and the Jingyao passport, a secondary identity for a Singaporean businesswoman traveling on internal Chinese permits. The photo was recent, the documents pristine. I shed Elena Chen's clothing, leaving it folded neatly, but irreversibly contaminated with a neutralizing solvent, and adopted the persona of Ms. Jingyao. The transformation was psychological as much as physical. New gait, different mannerisms, a distinct regional accent I had practiced for years. I booked a hard sleeper ticket on the slowest overnight train heading south, routing through secondary cities like Jinan and Hefei before finally reaching Shanghai Hongqiao 16 hours later. The choice of the slower, older train minimized the digital footprint associated with the high-speed rail network. Leaving the apartment felt like stepping off a cliff. I took nothing but the clothing on my back, the emergency kit, and the vial of adhesive residue. The apartment was now a sealed tomb, ready to tell its carefully constructed lie to the investigators. The train journey was a masterclass in controlled paranoia. The hard sleeper cabin was a tight, shared space, forcing proximity to strangers, the ultimate test of operational security. Every movement, every conversation fragment around me was mentally processed through a triple filter. Is it surveillance? Is it accidental? Is it a setup? I focused on maintaining the Jingyao persona, slightly irritable, focused on her mobile phone, a prepaid burner dedicated to playing low-resolution farming games, and disinterested in her surroundings. The biggest threat was the constant sweep of mobile phone triangulation and passive facial recognition cameras embedded in the train carriages and along the trackside. I kept the burner phone in airplane mode, only activating the transit card for small, innocuous purchases, noodles, bottled water, made away from the major train stations. I spent the night staring at the ceiling of the cramped bunk, counting the rhythmic click of the tracks, mapping out escape routes for every possible scenario: a sudden train stoppage, an unexpected document check, a confrontation in the narrow corridor. I realized I was exhibiting hypervigilance spasm, a psychological phenomenon common to deep cover operatives nearing extraction, where the mind overprocesses irrelevant data because it fears missing the single, crucial threat. To counter it, I performed complex mental math, calculating the volume of the Yellow Sea in cubic meters based on historical average depth. It was a self-discipline exercise. The dawn broke over the rice paddies of Anhui province, bathing the cabin in a stark, orange light. Shanghai was 3 hours away, and the certainty of detection increased exponentially with every kilometer closer to the density of a Tier 1 city. I knew they wouldn't hit me on the train. The optics were bad. They would wait for the rendezvous. Arriving at Shanghai Hongqiao Station was like plunging into a sensory riot. The density of the crowd provided excellent cover, but the surveillance infrastructure was exponentially more aggressive than Beijing. I moved like water, flowing with the crowd, never against it, maintaining a steady, average pace. I took the magnetic levitation train, a quick, high-profile journey, specifically chosen because it was too fast and too public for a discreet MSS arrest. My destination was the Willow Bridge Tea House, a centuries-old establishment known for its high turnover of foreign business clientele and its atrocious Wi-Fi signal, perfect for a secure, visual exchange. The librarian, whose real name I never knew, was my lifeline. The contact was purely visual. He would be seated at the table overlooking the garden, ordering a specific, historically inaccurate tea service, a Tang Dynasty-style set, an anachronism in a Ming Dynasty tea house. I would sit 3 tables away, ordering a standard jasmine blend. The signal was the arrangement of sugar packets on my saucer. If they were stacked vertically, the extraction was confirmed for Tianjin. If horizontal, the entire network was compromised, and I would walk away, disappearing permanently into the mainland's interior. I found him. He was tall, mid-50s, reading a thick, leather-bound volume, the agreed-upon cover prop. But as I took my seat and ordered, my peripheral vision picked up the anomaly. 2 tables across, a young man was drinking cold soda, wearing a highly customized sports watch, and ignoring his mobile phone entirely. His breathing was too shallow for someone relaxing. He was the tail. They hadn't followed me from Beijing. They had been watching the librarian and had picked up my signal the moment I entered the restaurant's immediate sphere of influence. My stack of sugar packets went vertical, Tianjin. But now the clock was less 48 hours and more 60 minutes. The confirmation of the tail, too, upon closer inspection, working in coordinated distraction, meant I couldn't risk leaving with the librarian or confirming the extraction details vocally. I had to execute the ghost fade maneuver. I needed immediate, extreme distraction. I pulled the last burner card from the emergency kit, a high-limit, encrypted payment chip linked to a European shell corporation designed solely for this moment. I subtly placed the chip on the table, activated it via a microswitch hidden under my watch strap, and initiated the panic transaction, a purchase order for 3 million renminbi worth of obsolete heavy machinery parts, routed through a known compromised subsidiary of a state-owned enterprise in Shenzhen. This transaction was specifically flagged in MSS financial monitoring systems as a known corruption trigger. The moment the signal registered in the system, it would trigger a massive, high-priority tracking alert in Shenzhen, diverting significant digital surveillance resources away from Shanghai. As the transaction completed, I knocked my teacup over, creating a small, localized chaos. I used the 2 seconds of distraction to slip a micronote under the librarian's book. Doc 42. Midnight. The tails, momentarily distracted by the commotion and simultaneously receiving frantic digital alerts about the major financial flag, lost their hard focus. This was my opening. I sprinted out the rear exit, navigating the winding, covered bridge of the tea house garden, and plunged into the surrounding market maze, abandoning the Jingyao identity immediately. The sprint through the Shanghai alleys demanded a complete shift in operational rhythm, from cautious, deep cover to immediate evasion. I shed the Jingyao jacket and cap in a waste bin, purchasing a cheap, oversized jacket and a fisherman's hat from a stall vendor using cash. I needed maximum disorientation for the tails. I utilized the subway system for the first time, making 3 rapid, crisscrossing transfers, never staying on the train for more than 2 stops, forcing the MSS tracking systems to predict 3 different destinations simultaneously. I needed to reach the rural transport nexus outside the city limits, aiming for the secondary road network leading towards Tianjin, 800 kilometers north. Public buses and illegal jitney services were my only options now. They lacked the centralized tracking and biometric scanning of the high-speed rail. The constant movement provided a thin shield, but my energy was fading, compounded by the lack of sleep and the acute stress. The paranoia reached its peak when I finally boarded an ancient, rattling bus heading toward a coastal town in Shandong province. I sat in the rear, constantly observing the road behind us through the smudged window, expecting the black Audis to materialize at any moment. During the long, monotonous drive through the countryside, I used my time to perform the final, irreversible security measure for the apartment back in Beijing. I removed the final burner phone, a satellite phone module disguised as a cigarette pack, and activated the timed relay. The relay was set to transmit a single, encrypted ping to the customized crucible in the Beijing apartment in 4 hours, ensuring the final detonation of the remaining digital cores and the induction heating unit occurred well after I was near the coast. The signal was irreversible, the destruction total. It was the only way to ensure the closure of the Elena Chin file. I arrived at the Tianjin port zone 46 hours after finding the wiretap. The coastal air was cold, damp, and smelled heavily of brine and diesel. The extraction point was Dock 42, a derelict stretch of waterfront used for loading scrap metal and obsolete naval equipment onto third-party freighters bound for Southeast Asia. The freighter, the M/V Silent Runner, was a rust bucket, exactly as specified in the Chimera Protocol. Its cargo manifest listed heavy machinery scrap, my decoy financial transaction coming home to roost. The librarian had done his job flawlessly. I navigated the maze of stacked containers, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the dockyard security patrols. Reaching the gangplank required a risky 50-meter open sprint across the concrete. I took the leap of faith, scrambling up the wet metal steps. A face appeared in the dim light of the deck, a man with hard eyes and no discernible uniform. He simply nodded and ushered me into a cramped, dark compartment below the bridge. As the M/V Silent Runner pulled away from Dock 42, the engines vibrating deep within the hull, I glanced back at the retreating coastline of China. It was a vast, unforgiving expanse, and somewhere within it, the identity of Dr. Elena Chen was dying. I checked my watch, 3:17 a.m. The 4-hour timer on the satellite module had elapsed exactly 60 seconds ago. Back in Beijing, a micro-crucible the size of a teacup was melting down the last vestiges of my life, reducing a decade of work into metallic slag. The escape was clean. The cost was everything. I was April Woods again. But the stain of the surveillance and the cold realization that they had played me for months would forever remain, an indelible scar of life under the cold glare of the dragon's eye.